The morning sun climbed slowly over the city, painting the tall buildings with warm golden light. It was a Tuesday morning in late September, and the downtown market was beginning to wake up for another busy day. The air smelled of fresh bread from the bakery next door, mixed with the faint scent of flowers from the outdoor stands. People walked past the market entrance, some hurrying to work, others taking their time to enjoy the pleasant weather. Inside the market, workers arranged fruits and vegetables in neat rows. They stacked apples in perfect pyramids and placed bunches of bananas on wooden tables. The floor was freshly mopped, and the fluorescent lights above hummed softly, creating a clean and welcoming atmosphere for the morning shoppers. Near the main entrance stood a man named Greg Morrison. He wore a dark blue security uniform with a badge pinned to his chest that read Market Security. Greg was 43 years old, with graying hair and a permanent scowl on his face. He had worked as a security guard at this market for nearly 5 years, but nobody in the building particularly liked him. Greg had a reputation that everyone whispered about but few dared to confront directly. He was known for his racist attitudes and his habit of treating customers of color with suspicion and hostility. Over the years, many shoppers had complained about his behavior, but the management had always brushed off these complaints with vague promises to look into it. Nothing ever changed, and Greg continued his pattern of discrimination without facing any real consequences. On this particular morning, Greg stood by the entrance with his arms crossed, watching people enter the market with judgmental eyes. He scrutinized each person who walked through the doors, his gaze lingering longer on customers with darker skin. His prejudice was not subtle, and regular shoppers had learned to avoid eye contact with him to prevent unnecessary confrontation. A few blocks away, a woman named Ava Johnson was getting ready to do her weekly grocery shopping. She lived in a small apartment on the east side of the city, where she had moved 3 years ago after accepting a teaching position at the local elementary school. Ava was 31 years old, a black woman with natural curly hair that she wore proudly, and a warm smile that made her students feel safe and loved. Ava took pride in her work as a teacher. She spent her evenings preparing lesson plans and finding creative ways to help her students understand difficult concepts. Her colleagues respected her dedication, and parents often requested that their children be placed in her classroom. Despite facing occasional discrimination in her daily life, Ava maintained a positive attitude and believed in treating everyone with kindness and respect. That morning, Ava grabbed her reusable shopping bags and headed out of her apartment. She decided to walk to the downtown market because the weather was beautiful and she enjoyed the exercise. As she walked, she thought about what she needed to buy for the week ahead. She mentally reviewed her shopping list: fresh vegetables for salads, some chicken for dinner, milk, eggs, and maybe some fresh fruit if the prices were reasonable. Ava had been to this market many times before, but she had never had a particularly pleasant experience with the security guard who worked there. She had noticed his hostile stares during previous visits, and she had heard other customers of color mention similar experiences. However, Ava believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt, and she tried not to let one person's bad attitude ruin her day. As she approached the market entrance, Ava took a deep breath and adjusted her shopping bags on her shoulder. She wore a simple blue dress and comfortable sneakers, perfect for a morning of shopping and walking. Her expression was calm and friendly as she prepared to enter the building. Greg spotted Ava from his position near the door. His eyes narrowed immediately and his jaw tightened. Without any reason or justification, he had already decided that this woman was someone to watch carefully. His prejudice clouded his judgment before Ava had even stepped through the entrance. Ava walked through the automatic doors, unaware of the hostile attention focused on her. She smiled politely at the security guard as she passed. As was her habit with everyone she encountered, Greg did not return her smile. Instead, he uncrossed his arms and began to follow her at a distance, his footsteps heavy and deliberate on the polished floor. The market was moderately busy that morning, with about 20 shoppers browsing the aisles. Some pushed shopping carts filled with groceries, while others carried small baskets for quick purchases. Background music played softly from speakers mounted on the ceiling, and the checkout counters beeped steadily as cashiers scanned items. Ava made her way to the produce section, where colorful fruits and vegetables were displayed under bright lights. She picked up a basket and began selecting items carefully, examining tomatoes for freshness and choosing the ripest avocados. She was completely focused on her shopping, unaware that Greg was watching her every move with suspicion and barely concealed hostility. What neither of them knew was that this ordinary Tuesday morning would become a defining moment in both of their lives. The choices made in the next few minutes would have consequences that would ripple far beyond the walls of this market, affecting not just Ava and Greg, but the entire community around them. Ava moved slowly through the produce section, her fingers gently pressing against the tomatoes to check if they were ripe. She picked up 3 red ones and placed them carefully in her basket. The market's air conditioning hummed quietly above her head, keeping the store cool and comfortable despite the warm autumn weather outside. She did not notice Greg standing about 15 feet behind her, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His eyes followed her every movement with deep suspicion, even though Ava had done nothing wrong. Greg had already decided in his mind that she was up to something dishonest. His racist beliefs had poisoned his judgment completely. Greg watched as Ava picked up an apple, examined it closely, and then placed it back on the display. To any reasonable person, this was normal shopping behavior. People always inspected fruit before buying it, but in Greg's twisted view, he saw this simple action as evidence of suspicious activity. Ava moved to the avocado section next. She picked up several avocados, testing each one to find the perfect ripeness. She wanted ones that were soft enough to eat within a day or two. One avocado felt too hard, so she put it back. Another felt too mushy, so she returned that one as well. Finally, she found 3 that felt just right and added them to her basket. Greg's face grew red with anger as he watched her. He convinced himself that she was hiding something. His prejudice created a false narrative in his mind where this innocent woman became a criminal in his imagination. He decided it was time to confront her. He walked toward Ava with heavy, aggressive footsteps. Other shoppers in the produce section noticed his approach and sensed the tension building in the air. Some stopped their own shopping to watch what was happening. A young mother pulled her child closer to her side instinctively. "Hey you," Greg called out loudly, his voice cutting through the peaceful atmosphere of the market. His tone was accusatory and filled with hostility. Ava turned around, surprised by the aggressive greeting. She saw the security guard approaching her with an angry expression on his face. "Yes, can I help you?" she asked politely, though she felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. Greg stopped just a few feet away from her, standing too close, invading her personal space in a way that felt threatening. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You've been acting real suspicious over here." Ava felt confused and defensive. She looked down at her basket containing only a few tomatoes and avocados, then back up at Greg. "I'm sorry." "But I don't understand," she said calmly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm just shopping for groceries." "Don't play innocent with me," Greg snapped, his finger pointing accusingly at her face. "I saw you putting things in your pockets. You're stealing from this store." The accusation hung in the air like poison. Several nearby shoppers gasped audibly. A teenage boy pulled out his phone, sensing that something serious was about to happen. Ava felt her face grow hot with embarrassment and anger. "That's not true," Ava said firmly, her voice gaining strength despite her growing fear. "I haven't stolen anything, I'm just shopping. You can check my pockets if you don't believe me." She held her arms out to her sides, showing that she had nothing to hide. Her blue dress had small pockets, but they were clearly empty. Nothing bulged or seemed suspicious about her appearance. Any rational person could see she was telling the truth. But Greg was not interested in truth or evidence. His racism had consumed his ability to think logically. "I don't care what you say," he growled, stepping even closer to her. "I know your type. You people come in here thinking you can take whatever you want." The racist statement shocked everyone within earshot. An elderly white woman shopping nearby shook her head in disgust at Greg's words. A man in a business suit stopped pretending to look at oranges and turned to watch the confrontation fully. Ava's shock transformed into righteous anger. She had dealt with racism before in her life, but it never stopped hurting. Being falsely accused of theft simply because of her skin color was deeply offensive and wrong. "You need to apologize right now," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "You have no right to accuse me of stealing, and you definitely have no right to make racist comments." Greg's face twisted with rage at being challenged. He was not used to people standing up to him, especially not black women who he believed should simply accept his authority without question. His hand suddenly shot out and grabbed Ava's arm roughly. "Let go of me," Ava demanded, trying to pull her arm away from his grip. His fingers dug into her skin painfully, fear mixed with her anger now. She realized this situation was escalating dangerously. "You're coming with me to the security office," Greg snarled, trying to drag her toward the back of the store. His grip tightened, causing Ava real pain. I said let go of me! Ava shouted louder this time. Her voice echoed through the produce section. More shoppers stopped what they were doing and turned to look. The teenage boy with the phone started recording video. In that moment of struggle, something inside Greg snapped completely. His rage overwhelmed whatever small amount of professional restraint he might have once possessed. He pulled his hand back and struck Ava hard on her upper arm. The slap made a sharp sound that everyone nearby could hear clearly. Ava stumbled backward from the force of the hit, dropping her shopping basket. Tomatoes and avocados rolled across the clean floor. Pain radiated through her arm where Greg had struck her. Shock and disbelief showed on her face. The market seemed to freeze for a moment. Everyone who witnessed the assault stood in stunned silence. The security guard had just physically attacked a customer for no reason, except his own racism and hatred. The teenage boy kept his phone recording. Capturing everything that had happened, Greg stood there breathing heavily, his fists still clenched, ready to strike again if challenged. He seemed to have no awareness of how wrong his actions were. His prejudice had led him to violence, and now there was no taking it back. The moment after Greg struck her felt like it lasted forever. Ava stood there with her hand pressed against her arm where he had hit her, feeling the sting of pain spreading across her skin. Her basket lay on the floor between them, vegetables scattered across the clean tiles. The other shoppers watched in shocked silence, waiting to see what would happen next. Something powerful awakened inside Ava in that moment. She had spent her whole life being taught to be polite, to be calm, to not make trouble. She had endured racist comments before and usually walked away quietly to avoid confrontation. But this time was different. This man had physically assaulted her in front of witnesses, and she was not going to let him get away with it. Ava stood up straighter, her fear transforming into pure determination. She looked Greg directly in the eyes, her voice coming out strong and clear despite her racing heartbeat. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," she said. Greg seemed surprised by her confident response. He had expected her to cry or run away or apologize. Instead, she stood her ground like a warrior preparing for battle. "What did you say to me?" he asked, his voice containing a threatening edge. "I said you made a mistake," Ava repeated, her voice growing even louder so everyone in the produce section could hear her clearly. "You racially profiled me, you falsely accused me of stealing, you grabbed me without my permission, and then you physically assaulted me. And all of these people saw you do it." She gestured around at the other shoppers who stood frozen in the aisles. Several of them nodded in agreement with her words. The teenage boy held his phone up higher, making sure his camera captured everything. An older woman whispered to her husband about calling the police. Greg's face turned an even deeper shade of red. He was not used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. "You need to watch your mouth," he said, taking a threatening step toward her, but Ava did not back away. Instead, she raised her hand and pointed her finger at his chest without actually touching him. "No, you need to watch yourself," she said firmly. "You don't get to put your hands on me. You don't get to treat me like a criminal just because of the color of my skin. I am a school teacher. I am a taxpayer. I am a human being who deserves respect. And you are a disgrace to your uniform." Her words rang through the market like a bell. Other shoppers began to murmur their agreement. A middle-aged black man started clapping slowly, then others joined in. The sound of applause filled the produce section. Giving Ava courage and strength, Greg looked around wildly, suddenly realizing that the crowd was not on his side. He had expected people to support him as the authority figure, the security guard, the person in charge. Instead, they were applauding this woman he had just attacked. His power was slipping away, and he could feel it. "All of you shut up," Greg shouted at the crowd, his voice cracking with frustration and anger. "This woman is a thief, and I'm doing my job." "Your job is not to assault innocent people," a white woman called out from near the lettuce display. She was elderly, probably in her 70s, wearing a purple sweater and thick glasses. "I've been shopping here for 20 years, and I've seen how you treat black customers. It's disgusting. And I'm glad someone is finally standing up to you." More voices joined in. Customers sharing their own experiences of watching Greg mistreat people of color. A Hispanic man talked about how Greg had followed his wife around the store last month. A young Asian woman described how Greg had demanded to search her purse for no reason. The stories poured out one after another, each one revealing Greg's pattern of racist behavior. Ava listened to all these testimonies, her eyes filling with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She was not crying from weakness. She was overwhelmed by the solidarity and support of these strangers who were standing up for her and for justice. "Where is your manager?" Ava demanded, looking directly at Greg. "I want to speak to your supervisor right now." Greg's confidence continued to crumble. He realized he had crossed a line that he could not uncross. "The manager is busy," he stammered, his earlier aggression fading into nervousness. "Then I will find the manager myself," Ava declared. She turned to address the crowd of shoppers. "Can someone please call the police while I find the manager? This man needs to be held accountable for what he did. I'm already calling them," the teenage boy with the phone announced, holding up his device. "And I got everything on video." "Me too," said a woman in business clothes, pulling out her own phone. "I recorded the whole thing, including when he hit you." Greg's face went pale as he realized the full extent of his situation. Multiple witnesses, video evidence, and now the police were being called. He had let his racism control his actions, and now he was going to face real consequences. Ava walked past Greg toward the front of the store, her head held high. The crowd of shoppers parted to let her through like she was royalty. Several people reached out to touch her shoulder supportively as she passed. Others whispered words of encouragement. "You're so brave," one young mother said quietly to Ava. "Thank you for standing up," an elderly man added, his voice full of respect. Ava felt the weight of their support giving her strength. She had not planned to become a symbol of resistance that day. She had only wanted to buy some groceries. But sometimes life forces you into moments where you must choose between silence and speaking truth. Between accepting injustice and fighting back. Ava had made her choice, and she was not going to back down now. Ava walked toward the customer service desk at the front of the store, her heart pounding but her steps steady and determined behind her. She could hear the murmur of voices as shoppers continued to discuss what had just happened. Some followed her, wanting to offer their support as witnesses. The teenage boy kept his phone out, still recording everything. The customer service desk was staffed by a young woman named Maria, who looked confused by the approaching crowd. She had been busy helping an elderly customer return a coffee maker and had not witnessed the incident in the produce section. "Can I help you?" Maria asked nervously, seeing Ava's angry expression and the group of people behind her. "I need to speak to the store manager immediately," Ava said, her voice firm but controlled. "One of your security guards just assaulted me. And I want someone in charge here right now." Maria's eyes went wide with shock. She picked up the phone on the desk and pressed a button, speaking quickly into the receiver. "Mr. Patterson, you need to come to the front desk right away. There's an emergency." She hung up and looked at Ava apologetically. "The manager will be here in just a minute." Ava nodded and waited, trying to calm her breathing. Her arm still hurt where Greg had struck her, and she knew there would probably be a bruise forming soon. The group of supportive shoppers gathered around her, forming a protective circle within 2 minutes. A tall man in his 50s wearing a white shirt and tie hurried toward the customer service desk. This was Robert Patterson, the store manager. He had worked at this market for 15 years and took pride in running a professional establishment. His face showed concern as he approached the crowd. "I'm Robert Patterson, the store manager," he announced. "What seems to be the problem?" "Your security guard, Greg Morrison, racially profiled me, falsely accused me of theft, grabbed me, and then physically assaulted me," Ava said clearly, making sure everyone could hear. "I want to file a formal complaint, and I want him fired immediately." Mr. Patterson's face went pale. He looked past Ava and saw Greg standing awkwardly near the produce section, still visible from where they stood. "Is this true?" he asked, though he could see from the serious expressions of all the witnesses that it was. "I recorded the whole thing on my phone." The teenage boy stepped forward, holding up his device. "I have video evidence of everything that happened, including when he hit her." "I have video too," another woman added, showing her phone. He was completely out of line. It was clearly racist behavior. The elderly woman in the purple sweater spoke up next, her voice quivering with emotion. "I've been shopping here for 20 years, and I've watched that man harass black and brown customers the whole time. I've complained before, but nothing ever changed. This woman is a hero for standing up to him." More witnesses came forward, each one sharing their account of what they had seen. Their testimonies painted a clear picture of Greg's violent and discriminatory actions. Mr. Patterson listened to each person, his expression growing more serious with every word. "I am deeply sorry for what happened to you, Mr. Patterson said to Ava, his voice sincere. "This behavior is absolutely unacceptable and does not represent the values of our store. I promise you that I will take immediate action." "Immediate action is not enough," Ava replied, her voice strong. I want to know exactly what consequences he will face. I want a written statement from this company apologizing for what happened. And I want assurance that this kind of discrimination will never happen again. Mr. Patterson nodded quickly. You have my complete cooperation. I will suspend Greg Morrison immediately pending a full investigation. I will personally review our security policies and provide additional training to all staff about racial discrimination. And I will work with our corporate office to ensure you receive a formal apology. At that moment, 2 police officers walked through the automatic doors at the entrance. They had responded to the 911 call about the assault. The officers looked around at the large group of people gathered near the customer service desk and approached cautiously. We received a call about an assault, the first officer said. A woman with short brown hair and a serious expression. Can someone tell us what happened? Ava stepped forward to address the officers. My name is Ava Johnson, and I was assaulted by the security guard who works here, she explained calmly. I have multiple witnesses and video evidence. The second officer, a tall man with graying temples, pulled out a notebook and began taking notes. Can you describe what happened, ma'am? He asked professionally. Ava recounted the entire incident from beginning to end, describing how Greg had accused her of stealing without any evidence, how he had grabbed her arm, and how he had struck her. Her voice remained steady throughout the telling, though her hands trembled slightly. The teenage boy came forward again. Officers, I have clear video of the assault, he said, holding up his phone. Would you like to see it? Yes, please, the female officer said. Taking the phone and watching the video carefully, her partner leaned in to watch as well. Both officers' expressions became grim as they witnessed Greg's violent actions captured on camera. This is definitely assault, the male officer said, looking up from the phone. Where is the security guard now? Mr. Patterson pointed toward the produce section where Greg still stood, looking increasingly nervous. That's him over there. Greg Morrison. The 2 officers walked toward Greg with purposeful strides. The crowd of shoppers parted to let them through. A hush fell over the store as everyone watched what would happen next. Greg saw the officers approaching and his face showed fear for the first time that day. Ava watched from the customer service desk, her arms crossed over her chest. She felt exhausted but victorious. She had refused to be a victim. She had demanded justice. And now the system was finally responding. The support of the community around her had made all the difference. The 2 police officers approached Greg with professional authority, their footsteps echoing through the now silent market. Every shopper in the building seemed to hold their breath, watching as justice finally caught up with a man who had abused his power for far too long. Greg Morrison? The female officer asked when they reached him, though she already knew his identity from the name tag on his uniform. Yes, Greg answered, his voice much quieter now than it had been when he was shouting at Ava. His earlier confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by visible fear. We need you to come with us to answer some questions about an incident that occurred here today, the male officer stated firmly. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Greg's face went white as the officer continued reading him his Miranda rights. He had never imagined that his actions would lead to this moment. In his racist worldview, he had believed he was untouchable, that his position as security guard gave him unlimited authority over people he considered inferior. Wait, you're arresting me? Greg stammered, looking around desperately for support that would not come. I was just doing my job. She was stealing. We have multiple witnesses and video evidence that contradicts your statement, the female officer replied coolly. You assaulted a customer without justification. That's a crime, regardless of your job title. The male officer pulled out handcuffs, and Greg's eyes widened in disbelief. This is ridiculous, he protested weakly. You can't do this to me. Turn around and place your hands behind your back, the officer instructed, his tone leaving no room for argument. Greg complied reluctantly, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The metallic click of the handcuffs closing around his wrists seemed impossibly loud in the quiet store. Several shoppers pulled out their phones to record this moment, documenting Greg's arrest just as they had documented his crime. As the officers led Greg toward the exit, he had to walk past Ava, who still stood near the customer service desk, surrounded by supportive witnesses. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Greg expected to see triumph or gloating in her expression, but instead he saw something more powerful, dignity. Ava did not celebrate his arrest or mock him as he passed. She simply stood there with her head held high, a living example of strength and courage in the face of injustice. Her silence spoke louder than any words could have. The automatic doors slid open, and the officers walked Greg out into the bright afternoon sunlight. A police car waited in the parking lot, its lights flashing red and blue. Curious onlookers stopped to watch as Greg was placed in the back seat, his security uniform a bitter irony now that he was the one being detained. Inside the market, Mr. Patterson approached Ava with genuine remorse written across his face. "Ms. Johnson, I cannot apologize enough for what happened to you today," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "Greg Morrison is terminated effective immediately, and I will personally ensure that charges are pressed against him to the fullest extent of the law." "Thank you," Ava replied, though her expression remained serious. "But I need more than just his termination. I need to know that this company will take real steps to prevent this from happening to anyone else." "Absolutely," Mr. Patterson agreed quickly. "I will implement mandatory anti-discrimination training for all employees within the next month. I will also establish a direct hotline where customers can report any incidents of bias or mistreatment, and I will work with community leaders to rebuild trust with customers of color who may feel unwelcome here." Ava nodded, satisfied that her complaint was being taken seriously. "I also plan to file a civil lawsuit against the store for allowing this hostile environment to exist for so long," she added. "Multiple people have told me today that they complained about Greg's behavior in the past, but nothing was done. That negligence contributed to what happened to me, Mr." Patterson's face showed genuine distress at this news, but he did not argue. "I understand," he said quietly. "You have every right to pursue legal action. If there were previous complaints that were ignored, then we failed in our duty to protect our customers." The elderly woman in the purple sweater stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Ava's shoulder. "I'll be your witness in any lawsuit," she offered. "I've complained about that man 3 times over the years, and each time I was told they would look into it. But nothing ever changed. I'll testify too," the teenage boy added, still holding his phone with the video evidence. "What he did was wrong, and he needs to face real consequences, one by one." Other witnesses came forward to offer their support. A Hispanic woman wrote down her contact information for Ava. A black man shared his own story of being followed by Greg months earlier. An Asian couple described how Greg had demanded to search their bags without cause. Ava listened to each story with growing understanding of how widespread Greg's discriminatory behavior had been. She realized that by standing up for herself today, she had also given voice to countless others who had suffered similar treatment in silence. "This is bigger than just what happened to me," Ava said to the gathered crowd, her voice filled with emotion. "This is about creating a world where people are treated with respect, regardless of the color of their skin. Today we took a stand against racism, and I am so grateful to every one of you for supporting me." The crowd erupted in applause, the sound filling the market with hope and solidarity. Strangers embraced each other, united by their shared experience of witnessing injustice and choosing to fight against it. Mr. Patterson handed Ava his business card. "Please contact me directly if you need anything," he said. "I mean it when I say we will do better." Ava took the card and slipped it into her purse. She felt exhausted but empowered, knowing that her courage had sparked real change. Later that evening, Ava sat in her small apartment, still processing everything that had happened. Her arm had developed a dark bruise where Greg had struck her, and she gently applied ice to reduce the swelling. The physical pain was minor compared to the emotional weight of the day's events. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. The teenage boy who had recorded the incident had posted his video online with Ava's permission, and it was spreading rapidly across social media platforms. Within just a few hours, the video had been viewed thousands of times, and the numbers kept climbing. Ava opened her laptop and searched for news about the incident. She was shocked to find that local news stations had already picked up the story. Headlines read, "Woman stands up to racist security guard," and "Brave teacher fights back against discrimination." Her name was being mentioned alongside words like courage, justice, and inspiration. Her phone rang, and she saw it was her mother calling. "Ava, baby, are you okay?" Her mother's worried voice came through immediately. "I just saw the video online. I can't believe what that man did to you." "I'm okay, Mama," Ava assured her, though her voice trembled slightly. "It was scary. But I'm glad I stood up for myself. I couldn't just let him get away with it." "I'm so proud of you," her mother said, emotion thick in her voice. "You are so brave." "Your father would have been proud too." Ava's father had passed away 2 years earlier. and she felt tears spring to her eyes at the mention of him. After hanging up with her mother, Ava scrolled through the comments on the video. Most of them were overwhelmingly supportive. People from all over the country were praising her courage and sharing their own stories of experiencing racial discrimination. "This woman is a hero," one comment read. "We need more people willing to stand up against racism like this." "I've experienced something similar at that same store," another person wrote. "Thank you for having the courage to fight back when I couldn't." However, not all the comments were positive. Some people accused Ava of overreacting or playing the race card. These hateful comments stung, but they were vastly outnumbered by messages of support and solidarity. The next morning, Ava woke up to find that the story had exploded even further overnight. Major news networks were covering the incident, and her phone was filled with interview requests from journalists and producers. The video now had over 2 million views. Ava decided to do a television interview with a respected local news anchor. She wanted to use this attention to talk about the broader issues of racial discrimination and systemic racism, not just her individual experience. During the interview, Ava spoke eloquently about her experience. "What happened to me happens to Black people and people of color every single day," she explained calmly. "The only difference is that my incident was caught on camera and people chose to pay attention. But there are countless others who suffer in silence because they're afraid or because nobody will believe them." The interviewer asked her what she hoped would come from this situation. Ava thought carefully before responding. "I hope this sparks real change," she said. "Not just at that one store, but everywhere. I want people to understand that racism isn't just about using slurs or wearing hoods. It's in these everyday interactions where people are treated as suspicious or dangerous simply because of their skin color." The interview aired that afternoon and was shared widely online. Ava's thoughtful words resonated with viewers across the country. Community leaders began reaching out to her, asking if she would speak at events about racial justice. Meanwhile, the market where the incident occurred was facing intense public scrutiny. Protesters gathered outside with signs reading "No Justice," "No Peace," and "End Racial Profiling." The store's corporate headquarters issued a public statement condemning Greg's actions and promising comprehensive policy changes. "We are deeply sorry for the traumatic experience, Ms. Johnson endured at our store," the statement read. "We are committed to implementing immediate reforms, including mandatory anti-racism training for all employees, establishing an independent oversight committee to review discrimination complaints, and creating a zero-tolerance policy for racist behavior." Civil rights organizations praised Ava's courage and offered to help her pursue legal action. Several prominent attorneys specializing in discrimination cases contacted her, offering to represent her pro bono. They believed her case could result in a significant settlement that would send a strong message to other businesses. One attorney explained that similar racial discrimination cases had resulted in settlements ranging from $50,000 to several $1,000,000, depending on the circumstances and evidence. With multiple witnesses, video documentation, and a clear pattern of the store's negligence in addressing previous complaints, Ava's case was very strong. Ava felt overwhelmed by all the attention, but she also felt a deep sense of purpose. She had not chosen to become a public figure, but she recognized the responsibility that came with her platform. If her story could help create positive change and empower others to stand up against discrimination, then the trauma she experienced would have meaning. She received hundreds of messages from people thanking her for her bravery. Teachers wrote to tell her they were using her story in their classrooms to discuss civil rights. Parents said their children were inspired by her example. Young Black women told her that seeing her stand up gave them hope. "Your courage reminded me that I don't have to accept mistreatment," one message said. "Thank you for showing us how to fight back with dignity," Ava saved these messages. Reading them whenever she felt doubt or fear, they reminded her that she was not alone, that her actions had touched lives far beyond that one moment in the market. 3 months after the incident, Ava sat in a conference room at a prestigious law firm downtown. Surrounded by legal documents and case files, she had retained one of the most respected civil rights attorneys in the state, a woman named Patricia Chen, who had won millions of dollars in discrimination settlements over her 20-year career. "Your case is exceptionally strong," Patricia explained, spreading photographs and witness statements across the large oak table. "We have video evidence, multiple credible witnesses, documentation of previous complaints against Greg Morrison that were ignored, and physical evidence of your injury. Cases like this typically settle in the range of several $100,000. But given the egregious nature of the assault and the store's negligence, we're pursuing much more. Ava nodded, still adjusting to the reality that she was involved in a major lawsuit. She had never imagined herself as someone who would sue anyone, but Patricia had helped her understand that this was about more than money. It was about accountability and preventing future victims. The market's corporate office has already reached out requesting settlement negotiations, Patricia continued. They know they're facing significant liability. Their own internal investigation confirmed that Greg had multiple complaints filed against him over the past 5 years, and management failed to take appropriate action. That negligence makes them liable for his actions. Meanwhile, Greg Morrison faced his own legal troubles. He had been charged with assault and battery, as well as violating Ava's civil rights. His criminal trial was scheduled for the following month, and prosecutors were confident in their case given the overwhelming evidence. Greg had hired a defense attorney who tried to argue that he had felt threatened by Ava and acted in self-defense, but the video evidence clearly contradicted this claim. The footage showed Greg as the aggressor at every stage of the confrontation. In the weeks leading up to settlement negotiations, Patricia's legal team gathered extensive documentation. They interviewed all the witnesses who had been present that day. They obtained security footage from multiple angles inside the store. They collected statements from other customers who had experienced Greg's discriminatory behavior in the past. One particularly damning piece of evidence came from a former employee of the market who came forward voluntarily. This woman, who had quit her job 6 months earlier, testified that she had personally filed 3 written complaints with management about Greg's racist treatment of customers. She provided copies of emails she had sent to her supervisors, all of which had been ignored or dismissed. This establishes a pattern of willful negligence, Patricia explained to Ava during one of their meetings. The company knew about the problem and chose to do nothing. That makes them just as responsible as Greg himself. The settlement negotiations began in early December. The market's corporate attorneys arrived with serious expressions and thick briefcases. They knew they were in a weak position and wanted to resolve the matter quietly before it went to trial. The corporate legal team opened with an offer of $75,000. Patricia rejected it immediately. "That's insulting given the severity of what happened to my client," she said firmly. "We're prepared to take this to trial if necessary, and I'm confident a jury will award significantly more." Over the course of 3 tense negotiation sessions, the number gradually increased. The corporate attorneys offered $150,000, then $200,000, then $300,000. Each time, Patricia countered with evidence of why Ava deserved more. "Let me remind you that similar racial discrimination and assault cases have resulted in settlements ranging from several $100,000 to several $1 million, Patricia stated during one heated exchange. In 2025 alone, Amazon paid $3.2 million to settle EEOC race discrimination claims. Jackson National Life Insurance settled for $20.5 million in a harassment and discrimination case. A Texas jury awarded $366 million in a racial discrimination case against FedEx. My client's case has clear video evidence, multiple witnesses, and documentation of corporate negligence. We are not settling for anything less than what she deserves." The corporate attorneys requested a recess to consult with their clients. After 2 hours of private discussion, they returned with a final offer. $425,000, plus a public apology from the company, mandatory anti-racism training for all employees, and the establishment of an independent oversight committee to monitor discrimination complaints. Patricia turned to Ava. "It's your decision," she said quietly. "This is a substantial settlement that acknowledges the harm done to you, but if you want to push for more, we can continue negotiating or proceed to trial." Ava thought carefully about her options. The money would be life-changing, but more importantly, the company was agreeing to make real systemic changes. Those changes could protect countless future customers from experiencing what she had endured. "I want one more thing added to the settlement," Ava said firmly. "I want the company to fund scholarships for students of color pursuing careers in social justice. $25,000 per year for the next 5 years." The corporate attorneys looked surprised by this request. They huddled together again. Discussing in whispered tones, finally they agreed. The total settlement package was now worth over $500,000 when accounting for all components. Patricia smiled at Ava with genuine admiration. "You just turned your pain into something that will help future generations," she said. "That takes remarkable courage and character." 6 months after signing the settlement agreement, Ava stood at a podium in front of 200 people gathered at the community center. She had been invited to speak at a civil rights forum about her experience and the importance of standing up against discrimination. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked out at the diverse crowd, but her voice was strong when she began to speak. When I walked into that market on that September morning, I was just planning to buy some groceries, Ava began, her words met with attentive silence. I never imagined that I would become part of a larger movement for justice, but sometimes life pushes us into moments where we have to choose who we want to be. She described the incident in detail, not sparing the painful parts, but also celebrating the courage she found within herself and the support she received from strangers who became allies. As she spoke, she saw people nodding in recognition, some wiping tears from their eyes. The settlement I received was not just about money, Ava explained. It was about forcing a company to acknowledge its failures and commit to real change. Today, that market has implemented comprehensive anti-racism training for all employees. They have established an independent committee to review discrimination complaints, and they are funding scholarships for young people of color who want to pursue careers in social justice. The audience erupted in applause. Several people stood up, and soon the entire room was on its feet. Ava felt overwhelmed by the support and had to pause to compose herself before continuing. But the most important outcome of this experience was not what happened to me, she said once the applause died down. It was what happened because of me. Dozens of people came forward with their own stories of discrimination at that same store. Their courage led to additional policy changes and accountability. One person speaking up gave others permission to do the same. After her speech, people lined up to talk with Ava personally. A young black woman told her that watching Ava's video had inspired her to report harassment at her own workplace. An elderly Asian man thanked her for giving his grandchildren an example of standing up for what is right. A white mother said she had used Ava's story to teach her children about racial justice. As for Greg Morrison, he had faced consequences that changed his life dramatically. He was convicted of assault and battery in criminal court and sentenced to 6 months in jail followed by 2 years of probation. He was also required to complete a racism awareness program as part of his sentence. More significantly, Greg lost his security license and would never work in that field again. The viral video of his attack on Ava had made him recognizable, and no company wanted to hire someone with his record. He was forced to confront the consequences of years of racist behavior. Some people argued that Greg's punishment was too harsh, but many more believed it was exactly what he deserved. His case became a warning to others in positions of authority who might abuse their power or allow prejudice to guide their actions. The market where the incident occurred underwent significant transformation. The new policies implemented as part of the settlement became a model for other businesses in the community. Several other retail chains adopted similar anti-discrimination measures, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond one store. Ava used part of her settlement money to create a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting victims of racial discrimination. She partnered with local attorneys who agreed to provide pro bono legal consultations to people who could not afford representation. Her organization also offered counseling services and advocacy training. She remained a teacher at the elementary school. Finding that her experience had made her even more passionate about educating young people, she incorporated lessons about civil rights, standing up to injustice, and treating all people with respect into her curriculum. Her students learned that one person really could make a difference. 1 year after the incident, the city honored Ava with a Community Hero Award at the ceremony. The mayor praised her courage and the positive changes her actions had sparked throughout the community. Ava Johnson showed us that justice requires ordinary people to do extraordinary things, the mayor said. She refused to be a victim and instead became a champion for all of us. Ava accepted the award with humility. "I'm not a hero," she said in her acceptance speech. "I'm just someone who decided that enough was enough. We all have that same power within us. When we see injustice, we have a choice. We can look away, or we can stand up. I chose to stand up, and I hope my story encourages others to do the same." In the audience that night were many of the people who had supported her that day in the market. The teenage boy who recorded the video sat with his parents. Now interested in studying criminal justice in college, the elderly woman in the purple sweater smiled with pride. The other witnesses who had testified on Ava's behalf cheered loudly as Ava looked out at the crowd. She realized that her painful experience had been transformed into something beautiful and meaningful. She had not chosen to be assaulted that day, but she had chosen how to respond. And that choice had created waves of positive change that would continue long after she was gone. Her story became a lesson taught in schools, shared in diversity training programs, and referenced in discussions about racial justice. It reminded people that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite fear. It showed that one voice raised against injustice could inspire thousands more. Ava Johnson had walked into a market to buy groceries and walked out as a symbol of resistance and hope. She proved that ordinary people in ordinary moments could create extraordinary change, and that legacy would endure,